Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corn Productions with my co-host Stacie, here for the first official episode of our brand new podcast covering the revival of Quantum Leap, the first episode since 1993. This is Season 1, Episode 1, titled July 13th, 1985. That's kind of an interesting series title. I'm not sure I like it. In fact, I don't. Anyway, the series premiere of the new series. The episode description reads as follows. A new team assembles to restart the Quantum Leap project. Lead physicist Ben Song takes an unauthorized leap into 1985 as the team scrambles to figure out what happened and how to get him back. The episode was directed by Thor Freudenthal, which is a pretty nifty name. I'm wondering if this guy runs around with like a hammer and rides some lightning occasionally. He has 33 acting credits. Seems to have had some work on the DC Arrowverse, which is a series of TV shows, having directed The Flash, Supergirl, and 4 episodes of Arrow. He most recently had work on the series La Brea, which I think, Stacie, you mentioned to me at one point.
Yes, La Brea is another NBC series, which premiered last year. It's aired one season. It is a show I enjoy. I think anybody who likes the Quantum Leap universe would also be interested in checking out La Brea. Season 2 starts next week, I believe, so fingers crossed NBC keeps that going as well. It involves time travel, although accidental time travel. And it reminds me of the Netflix television show Dark, if anybody's checked that one out, where it has kind of like that timey-wimey thing where people are related to each other crazily because of time travel. So it's a fun one.
The episode was written by Steve Lyon, and I'm talking about Quantum Leap again, and Brian Wybrandt, who also serve as executive producers on the series. And there's a ton of producers on this series. It's kind of ridiculous, but I guess that's modern television for you. Before going any further, there's a couple of things I would like to tell you. This is not a spoiler-free podcast, so if you haven't watched the episode, I highly recommend you go and check it out and then give us a listen. Secondly, this is now listenable on multiple different platforms. If you are listening on one of the podcast platforms, feel free to subscribe or follow. And you can also go over to my Corn Productions YouTube channel and check out my other content there. If you're already on my YouTube channel and you want to support the channel, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to my channel.
And your channel is just about to hit that milestone of 1,000.
I just checked recently, like before doing this podcast, and it's actually at 999. So I'm one subscriber away.
Hopefully by the time this drops, you're going to have 1,000. Although I know that YouTube likes to scrub when you hit milestones, so it'll probably drop a little bit as soon as it gets there. But let's get the channel up and over 1,000 and keep it there. That'll be amazing. So yeah, if you're not subscribed, Corman Productions on YouTube. Go do that now.
All right, one more thing before we get into the actual episode itself. A couple of days ago, we got some news that's relevant from Scott Bakula.
Yes, so ahead of the episode airing, Scott Bakula put out a press release on Twitter and Instagram. And I'm going to go ahead and read that verbatim. This is what Scott Bakula had to say. To Quantum Leap fans around the world, in an effort to quiet the rumors and move on, first of all, thanks for hanging around through the decades. There's a simple version of what's going on with the Quantum Leap reboot and me.
And he misspoke there. It's not a reboot. It's a revival.
Right. He continues to say, I have no connection with the new show, either in front of the camera or behind it. In January, the pilot was sold and a script was sent to me because the character of Sam Beckett was in it, which makes sense, right? And so many of you have been asking me the last several months, how do you do Quantum Leap without Sam, or Al for that matter? Well, I guess we're about to find out. That's the story. As the show has always been near and dear to my heart, it was a very difficult decision to pass on the project. A decision that has upset and confused so many fans of the original series. However, the idea of anyone leaping around in time and walking a mile in someone else's shoes remains a very appealing concept and so worthy of exploration, especially given the current state of mankind. In that spirit, I am crossing my fingers that the new cast and crew are lucky enough to tap into the magic that propelled the original Quantum Leap into the hearts and minds of generations past and present. I wish them good luck and happy leaping. So, Scott Bakula has publicly said he is not involved in any way in the project.
Which, if that's his decision, I respect it. It is disappointing. It's possible that he read the scripts for the new series. He didn't like it, so he decided to pass. Maybe he just didn't want to do it without Dean Stockwell. There's also another possibility, that he's straight up lying about his involvement.
He could be completely trying to misdirect us so that everybody is really surprised when we see Sam.
There is certainly precedent for that among Hollywood shows and movies. The most recent example I can think of is Spider-Man Far From Home. That was a movie where it was rumored that Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire would be making appearances. They both played Spider-Man previously. And Andrew Garfield denied up and down that he had no involvement in the movie, and wouldn't you know it, he was totally in the movie. So this is not without precedence that he could be lying.
It is possible that he already is supposed to be involved and just wants us to be surprised when it happens. Or he could be sincere saying, I'm not doing this. But even if that's the case, there's still a chance that he watches the show, likes it, and changes his mind and wants to be a part of the project in the future. After watching the episode and learning what we do learn in this episode, I am hopeful that we do get to see more of Sam Beckett again, right? The episode didn't eliminate that possibility from the story.
And I think it's actively kind of hinting that's where it wants to go.
Right. So, even though Scott Bakula tells us he's not involved, we can still keep our fingers crossed that that changes at some point.
So tell me, Stacie, what did you think overall of the episode?
I enjoyed the episode. I think that it's definitely worth checking out. Anybody who is a fan of the original show or anybody who just likes this kind of sci-fi genre should check out this story, this series. It's different, right? The tone of it was definitely very different from the original show. But there were plenty of moments that made me squeal. Where it was referential to the original series. So
I definitely smiled more than once at these references.
Yeah, so they didn't forget about us. There's lots of Easter eggs and direct references, and I expect that to continue. And also, I feel like they're trying to be open to a new audience who hasn't seen the original series. Whether they were successful at that or not, I'm not sure, but
I, too, enjoyed the episode. I do have some issues with it. Mainly the pacing. The pacing of the episode is insane. It tries to fling a lot of information at us right away. And if you're new to the series, that might be a turnoff.
Yep. I actually ended up watching the show live when it aired with my sister. She just happened to be sitting with me and she watched the show and she's never seen a day of Quantum Leap in her life, has no idea about anything. So I said, this would be a nice perspective to see, right? And she was very confused. She watched this pilot and didn't know what was going on. She didn't understand the project. She didn't understand the leaping. She didn't understand who's supposed to be who and what's going on with the mirror. And I have to say it's simply because, the timing was really crazy. And they didn't stop to tell us much. They just kind of kept going.
It's a far cry from the original pilot, Genesis, which was extremely slow-paced and was also not a very good episode of television, being real here.
Right.
I kind of think that I would like something in between the pacing of the original show and what we saw last night.
Yes, the original pilot was brutally slow, where we literally saw Al wave to Sam from across the room in half a dozen scenes before they even had contact with each other.
It took like 42 minutes to finally learn what was going on with Sam, which is the same length as this episode was in its entirety.
Yes, so they took a full 90-degree or 180-degree turn and gave us completely the opposite of what we got there. So it was a very different pilot.
All right, so when we begin, we hear Deborah Pratt's voice, sounding significantly older than when we last heard her. I guess she's playing Ziggy here. Internet Movie Database credits her as such. We never hear her actually voice Ziggy. We don't hear Ziggy's voice at all, other than this intro, which is basically to just introduce the new series and say where we left off, with Sam Beckett never returning home. We hear some loud footsteps. I'm not sure if you can hear that. Don't worry about it. It's probably just the dogs. So, when we open, we see a mysterious woman. Mm-hmm. We don't know who she is.
Yep.
We're clearly at the project, though when we see the episode originally, we don't necessarily know that. We see a close-up of her ring that she's wearing, which in television terms means this is important.
Yeah, pay attention.
She texts our hero, Ben Song, who, as it turns out, is at his engagement party. Married to Addison.
Engaged to Addison.
Engaged to. She's not married yet, and it might never happen at this point.
Yeah, so they're having an engagement party, and all of the co-workers are there, and that's our first introduction to the new characters.
Ben is very clearly rich. He has more money than I do. He has a big house. And he's antisocial, which I can totally relate to him on that. I'm not a genius, but I also don't really especially like big crowds or people, for that matter.
Ben was very adamant that he did not want to give a speech. They made him do it anyways.
Yeah, that's friends and coworkers for you. Ben and Addison kiss, and they're interrupted by Jen Cho, one of the new characters, head of security for the project. She's played by Nanris Lee. She has 51 acting credits, including recently an appearance on Star Trek Picard, the second season, American Crime Story, which was during the Monica Lewinsky season, and a season of American Horror Story, which is a show that we both watched at one point.
I did not recognize her. Do we know who she played in that?
Not really familiar with her role on that, no.
Okay. Probably a smaller role.
The entire cast soon joins them. One Ian Wright, played by Mason Alexander Park, our non-binary character. And oh, by the way, for those who were complaining and worrying about the wokeness of the show, yes, we have a non-binary character, but they aren't really commented on. And we also have an Asian main character. Mm-hmm. If that's your problem, I mean, I don't sympathize with your point of view. Otherwise, the show doesn't really get political. No. Not during the first episode, anyway. It's very kind of superficial, the leap itself. And we also have Ernie Hudson, who plays Herbert Magic Williams, rather. You would recognize him from Ghostbusters, or all 4 movies, actually. 2 with the original cast, the reboot, which he had a cameo in, and that's the much reviled film. And then Ghostbusters Afterlife, which was a continuation of the original universe. We don't get much backstory on him, other than the fact that he was in Vietnam, which we already knew.
All we really hear about is he mentions Vietnam a couple times. Those of us who know who Magic is know that already. Anybody, of course, tuning in for the first time hasn't learned a lot about this character yet.
But apparently, from interviews, we will get more information about this character as we go. I mean, I would certainly hope so. Ben ends up giving a speech, which he's forced to do, about what was that law again, do you know?
Entanglement? The law of entanglement or entanglement theory.
Which is an actual law. Sorry, I'm just looking that up real quick. Okay, so the law is, when 2 particles, such as a pair of protons or electrons, become entangled, they remain connected even when separated by vast distances. And the quantum theorist, of course, thinks this is a romantic speech.
Yes. And it comes up again later in the episode.
Which is why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, they discuss the entanglement theory. Is it called entanglement theory? Or law of entanglement?
The law of entanglement.
Law of entanglement. Okay, we should remember that, because I think that's going to be kind of Ben's pet thing throughout this.
Addison and the rest of the cast goes and mingles. Ben gets a mysterious text message from a girl, who we also already know is the mysterious girl that we saw at the beginning. And we see him get really emotional, and this is when he makes the decision to make his unauthorized leap back to 1985.
Mm-hmm. And they showed us that text, and it basically said, to paraphrase, we're running out of time, the window is closing, we have to do it now.
And we're going to have to wait till the future, if ever, to find out what that means exactly.
Yeah, why did it have to happen now?
So, we see the camera spinning around, and Sam, sorry, not Sam.
Probably not the first time we're going to make that mistake.
Ben is now in 1985. Curiously, we don't really see the leaping effect. In fact, we don't really see it at all much. We see it very briefly at the end of this episode.
Yeah, and it looks different.
It does, and I kind of expected that.
Yeah.
I did hear a hint of the old leaping sound effect. I'm not sure if you noticed that.
I didn't notice that, no.
It's it's subtle, but it's not quite as loud. He's in 1985. He's next to a guy named Nick. Or actually, no, it's not Nick. It's Ryan, sorry.
He is Nick, and he is sitting with Ryan.
Yes. And this is his friend, of course, he has no memory of who he is. And he says, "How did I get here?" And of course, Ryan relates to this. He says, I know, right? Like million little bad decisions. So I thought that was a cute moment. That was a good way to play that off. He gets out of the car after Ryan goes and does his thing, which commits the burglary. We think it's a bank robbery. That turns out not to be the case. And we see 1985. We see the movies that are playing. St. Elmo's Fire and The Goonies.
Yeah.
I did check. And those are both movies that played during that time. Whether they were playing at the exact same time, I don't know. I didn't look that far into it, but they were at least the same year.
Mm-hmm.
The project is very quick to find Ben. Much quicker than we did in the original series.
Yeah, Ben had just slipped in, although the first thing Addison says is, "We've been looking for you for hours."
And from our perspective, Ben has only been there for like a minute or two.
Right. So, and we did see that in the original series a couple of times early on. They talked about this where, Sam was like, "I just got here," and Al was like, "No, for us, time has passed." So
right.
There is some.
It's consistent.
Yeah.
It's not a variation on the original series. So Addison starts to explain who he is, because he has no memory whatsoever of the fact that he's Ben and that he's a time traveler.
And he doesn't recognize Addison.
Which is very sad for Addison.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't get a chance to explain because she's interrupted by Ben's new friends who want him to drive a getaway vehicle. And, of course, he doesn't know how to drive stick.
Yeah.
I don't either, so don't feel bad about that, Ben. I would not do very well in this situation at all.
No, it was very reminiscent of in the pilot episode of the original Quantum Leap when Sam doesn't know how to fly an airplane. And Al sits next to him and tells him what to do. So Addison stepped into that role and explained very quickly to Ben how to drive this car.
And as a side note, Ryan is actually played by Michael Welch. I am pretty familiar with him. He was in Star Trek Insurrection, a movie called Boy Meets Girl, and an episode of the short-lived sci-fi show that I loved, The Invisible Man. I don't know, did you ever see that show?
I did not.
Okay. It lasted like 2 seasons, so, it's another one of those quick hook shows. Sci-Fi Channel was also bad at keeping shows going. But anyway, he played a kid in an episode, the second season, Johnny Apocalypse. When he reached puberty, bad things would happen. So it was very funny to realize that was the same guy. So I've been familiar with this actor. He was okay-ish in this episode. He wasn't great. He was just okay.
Yeah. The whole leap really just felt kind of mediocre. It wasn't a huge, strong story. I don't think this leap in and of itself is going to become very memorable.
And I don't think it was really intended to. I think it was just kind of a placeholder so that we can set everything up.
Right. And in a short time frame, because they're trying to do both the past and the future timelines in a very short amount of time.
So anyway, after successfully evading the cops, pretty impressive. I would not have been able to do that. I wouldn't have even gotten out of the driveway. He learns that this is only part 1 of the criminal activity that is about to take place. Very unfortunate, because I'm sure he doesn't want anything more to do with this. Addison starts to explain who he is, and she's just prepared to fling information at him. She's not going to take it easy on him like Al did in the original series.
Yeah. She's putting it all out there.
The one thing that she's declining to mention is the fact that they are engaged. And I'm kind of curious as to why.
Yeah, she held back just that one piece of information, which is consistent with what we saw in the original trailer.
But I'm actually curious as to what her motivations behind that were. She didn't seem to have any problem overwhelming him because she gave him everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she can't be worried about him getting into romances with other people at this point.
Right.
So I'm not sure why she doesn't tell him.
I don't know. Maybe we'll find out.
We will, at a later date, get more information on that. Maybe. Maybe it's just to prolong the drama. But she doesn't get it very long to explain very much because the imaging chamber goes kablooey. There's some kind of malfunction back at the project. Ziggy is down. We have a brief look at the imaging chamber, and it kind of looks like the holodeck from Star Trek The Next Generation, which is funny because your husband frequently references the original imaging chamber as the holodeck.
Yep. If you were listening to episode 0 when we were talking about the show, like what we know before the show started, I did mention that my husband and I are watching the original Quantum Leap for the first time for him. He's watched the series through. And Star Trek Next Generation is his favorite series of all time. So every time we mention the imaging chamber, he calls it the holodeck.
And for me, the imaging chamber also kind of somewhat resembled Cerebro from the X-Men movies. Anyway, moving along. Before leaping, we are told, by Ian Wright, I believe it was, that Ben uploaded a bunch of new code and that Ziggy is down.
Right.
The project was supposed to be updated so that they can leap into a specific point and then come back. But this was not supposed to happen for years. They were not ready, and Ben leaped well before that was able to happen.
Yeah, Ian told us that this particular group has been working on this project for 5 years, and they were still years away from actually sending a person on a leap.
We learn in this scene that the Pentagon is involved with the project. We learn this through magic, played by Ernie Hudson. And I'm actually curious as to what the Pentagon is hoping to get from this project.
Right, and we also learn that they're planning on keeping Ben's leap a secret from them as long as possible to try and not get the project closed down. So the people within this room are now keeping the secret from the government who is running the project.
Now, the interesting thing about the original series is that they didn't really dive into the project politics that much.
No, there was the time when we got to see Al petitioning to keep the project open.
That was in Honeymoon Express,
Yeah.
and that was the second season premiere, and that was the last time that we ever saw
They
the
really
politic
talked
projects.
about it. Yep.
So I'm interested to see if they're going to dive into that a little bit more with this new series.
Now, we did get to learn within the scope of this episode that Magic is very high up on the food chain. He knows things. Besides being the leader of this secret project, he seems to know other secrets of the government. So that does get kind of hinted at. I don't know. He seems to be in really tight with the powers that be.
And given the fact that he is a relatively senior member of the project, that does not seem that surprising. We go back to the past where Ben is in the bathroom. Addison reappears and she appears quite pissed at Ben. And it's kind of funny that they're in the bathroom because that was something that frequently happened in the original series. So that's a nice little subtle callback.
Little Easter egg, yeah.
So Ben doesn't know what he did, but he is sorry for doing it. And because, yeah, he's told that he didn't reveal the reason why he left early. So he apologizes for that. This conversation is interrupted by Ryan, who's wondering who is he talking to, which is another little thing that happened a lot in the original series. We see the mastermind of the unfolding crime in Cole, and he's played by a guy named Michael Malarkey. That's quite an interesting last name, Malarkey.
Sounds like he should be playing the bad guy.
Yes, absolutely. And it also could be something that a person could use to joke about the series. Just a bunch of malarkey. Anyway, dumb joke, I know, but that's what I'm good for. They question whether Ben is up to the crime, and for the time being, thanks to Ryan, they end up satisfied. The crime involves blowing something up with C4. Well, that definitely does not sound like a good thing.
No. And Addison and the crew have not figured out what's going on yet. They said they can't find any information on Nick Rounder. and it's a big mystery of what's going on.
Back at the project, they mentioned that the explosion happened at a museum in which nobody got hurt.
Right. They tracked the C4 that had been stolen. It was exploded without any casualties.
So they were curious as to why Ben was going there in the first place.
Right. He's obviously not here to save people's lives in the explosion because nobody died in the explosion.
They mentioned Live Aid during this, which was actually being broadcast on a TV in the car when Ben originally leaped in. Live Aid, for those not familiar, was a multi-venue benefit concert that was held on July 13th, 1985. What do you know? That's this day.
That's this day, and Ben is in Philadelphia, which was one of the places that the concert was happening.
The other was London, and it was to raise funds for famine in Ethiopia. Sounds like a good cause to me. So, back at the project, Ziggy is finally back online. And we have this scene between Ben and Ryan that starts to establish the heart of this episode, which is one of my concerns about going into this new series. That they wouldn't have the same kind of heart, that it'd be a straight-up action-adventure series, which for the most part this episode kind of seemed. But they did at least have some attempt to connect to somebody, mainly Ryan, and this is actually the person that we are here to save for this episode.
Right. We found out that, aside from the whole explosion, that Ryan dies tonight.
And Ben thinks that Ryan is here to save the restaurant, but apparently there's more to it than that. We eventually see Ryan's family, and we get the idea that they are not in good shape.
Yeah, his wife had just come from dialysis, so we know she has some medical concerns, and we know that they don't have the money to pay for it.
Addison appears to tell Ben that Ryan is going to die tonight, and Ben makes the silly claim that Ryan is not a criminal. He's just there trying to help his family. Okay, Ben, if you rob somebody and intend to steal something else...
and make an explosion to make it happen...
you are a criminal,
yes,
regardless of what your motivations are.
Right. Every criminal has a reason they become a criminal.
So I thought that was kind of silly and kind of funny.
But he sympathized with Ryan right away and wanted to help him.
Ben and Ryan in the car. Ben tries to convince him not to go through with the robbery, thinking that something bad was going to happen. He doesn't really have much luck with this. They go to meet with other criminal associates. I wasn't really clear on who these people were that they were going to see.
They were going to see the jeweler.
The jeweler, okay.
Which is, other criminals involved in jewelry.
Right, and they were there to give him the fake Hope diamond.
Yes, they bought this fake diamond from this criminal jeweler who is Romanian. And it doesn't go well.
We find out that Ben knows Romanian,
yes,
as it turns out, much like Sam Beckett did in the original series. Well, I don't know that it was ever specifically stated that Sam knew how to speak Romanian, but he knew how to say a bunch of different languages.
Right, and Addison tells Ben, you know a lot of languages, including Romanian, and that's why you can understand what this guy is saying.
And we see Ben take advantage of Ziggy for the first time,
yes,
as he gets information to get him out of this jam.
Yes, he plays off that he knows this guy, knows all about him, and kind of insinuates that if you don't cooperate with us, I'm going to ruin your life. By using information that Ziggy tells him that Nick would not have actually known.
Back at the project, Jen, the security person, discovers a mysterious figure talking to Ben with a military ring. And we don't get much more information than that.
And this is from the security footage before the night that Ben left.
It's pretty crazy that she could not see who the figure is, but could very clearly see the ring.
Yes, she has an image of the ring that the mysterious woman was wearing.
And this is actually where Jen tries to quit.
Well, Jen asks Magic to fire her. Because Jen says, somebody needs to take the fall for this. I'm your head of security. You took a chance in hiring me. I hope we do get more backstory on what that means. I should take the fall for this. And Magic refused.
And, you know, it seems like Ernie Hudson's Magic character is kind of like the father figure of the project.
Yep. He's everybody's best friend. He's not a mean boss.
Well, that's good news for them. Back at the home base in the past, Ben is outed as a undercover cop. And what was that guy's name again?
So the cop's name is Matt Shaw. we found out that the reason they couldn't find any information on Nick Rounder is because Nick Rounder didn't actually exist. That was his alias as an undercover police officer.
I'm tempted to call this a whiff on Ziggy's part, much like he frequently whiffed in the original series, in not giving crucial information to Ben.
Right, you would think that this supercomputer would have been able to find records that there was an undercover police operation happening, but they didn't.
I mean, hey, nobody's perfect, not even supercomputers. So they are considering killing Ben. Ryan ends up talking them out of it. They keep him alive, but they tie him up.
And then they proceed to go to steal the diamond and leave Ben/Nick/Matt tied up in the kitchen of the restaurant.
And this actually puts a wedge between Ryan and Ben. So, and that's actually something else I forgot. Ben had actually successfully talked Ryan out of committing the crime after convincing him that he was going to die that night.
Yes.
Until this scene.
Yeah, and it didn't matter anymore because now the bad guys think it's all a setup, and basically both Ben and Ryan's lives are in danger just because of the police involvement, and the bad guys want to get rid of them.
Back at the project, we have a brief scene with Ian as he's having a panic attack, and he ends up talking to Magic. And he talks about how he had shrooms at one point. But of course, no, he didn't have shrooms because he's a government employee, so of course he wouldn't do that. Back to the past where Ben is tied up, we find out that Addison was supposed to be the Leaper. And that's an interesting tidbit.
Yes, so their plan, years in the future, when they were ready for human testing, Addison was hired to be the Leaper, and Ben was hired to be her holographic observer.
And unfortunately, it did not work out that way for Addison, or fortunately, depending.
Right, which is part of Addison's question on why did you do this? Not only why did you leap now, but why did you leap at all?
Right, before the project was ready. And Ben ends up getting out of the restraints thanks to Madison's know-how. Ben is about to make a phone call, but then he doesn't. He doesn't. Even though Addison is telling him that there's a 99% chance if he calls the police about the Hope Diamond being stolen, he will leap. But Ben doesn't want to do it because he wants to save Ryan.
Right, he doesn't want Ryan to get arrested, which, I don't know. Wouldn't it be better off to have him arrested than to have him killed?
I mean, I would think so. But
and you're saving the diamond, and you're stopping the explosion. Ben seemed a little overconfident, in my opinion, that he was going to be able to fix everything without involving the police.
I mean, that was very Sam-like, though.
It was, yes.
That would be something that Sam would do.
But on a first leap...
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would definitely not have that kind of confidence, for sure. So, you gotta admire his cojones. So, anyway... he doesn't. He makes a reference to not giving a damn about what Ziggy says, which is something that made me smile because Sam would frequently say that in the original series.
Yes.
So Ben ends up getting dressed, and at the museum. Which did we ever figure out what museum this was?
No, I was a little confused about this whole thing, and that kind of distracted me during this episode because the Hope Diamond's on display at some museum in Philadelphia. That didn't happen in real life. I looked into the history of the Hope Diamond. It's in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., which they did mention in this episode. But I found on the Smithsonian website very detailed history of the diamond. It's only left the Smithsonian a handful of times, and none of those times was 1985 Philadelphia.
The closest we got was 1984 New York.
Yes, so... they took a little bit of liberty with the history of the Hope Diamond here and kind of fabricated this event where the Hope Diamond was on display at some museum in Philadelphia, which is not historically accurate. But we can move past that.
So at the museum, Ben ends up asking, what happens if I die? And Addison comes, well, what happens if the person they leaped into dies? And she just straight up says, you die. So. Yeah. Which we saw in the trailer. We already knew about that. It's curiously the only mechanic in this episode that they actually explain.
They really talk about, yeah.
And, given the fact that they flung a bunch of information in, and this was supremely rushed. Cramming more information to this would have been just way too much, and it was way too much as it was.
Right.
We go into the museum. Ben ends up taking out one guy that was supposed to stop something. I was a little confused about that. Doesn't really matter.
He changed the course of events, of course.
He finds Ryan to tell him that he's going to stop the heist and goes after Charlie, the woman who was involved with the heist. And they have a tango, which is a nice little callback to the original series, specifically the second season episode Sea Bride, in which Sam also had a tango. Under very different circumstances. She ends up pulling out a gun and firing shots in the air. Now the explosion that wasn't going to kill anybody potentially could kill quite a few people.
A lot of people, yeah.
So good job there, Ben.
And that's his overconfidence stepping in again. He said, I know what happens. Nobody dies. You forgot the fact that, just you being here changes what's happening. Anything is possible in this go-around.
I mean, we could chalk that up to a character flaw and makes the character interesting. But he definitely screws up here. Ryan ends up telling Ben where the bomb is. Ben ends up getting rid of it by throwing it down a sewer. And Ben and Ryan share a touching farewell. Everything works out just fine and dandy. Happy ending. Mm-hmm. Tears.
And Addison gives us the feed it back that Ziggy tells her, similar to what Al would have always done at the end of an episode, saying what works out for everybody. And it went so far as saying that the city of Philadelphia is so happy that they saved the day, that Ryan's wife's medical bills are paid for. It was a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I would like to have known how any of that happened, given, what we were told.
Yeah, so Ziggy really gave us a pretty little bow at the end.
I mean, it's nice. I kind of like happy endings. We also get a callback to the earlier beginning scene at the engagement party with when Ben, or actually rather Addison, brings up the law of entanglement. So that was cute. Back at the project, they fail to get Ben home. Something happens with the coding.
Yeah,
not quite sure what.
The retrieval didn't work. I don't think that was a surprise to viewers.
I mean, show over if it does. I think Kayleen speculated that this was done on purpose and that Ian Wright was behind it.
Yes. My sister and I were questioning, is it possible that Ian and or Jen are in on what Ben did?
And it'd be very interesting to see that as we go along. Get some answers on that, hopefully, eventually. So, Jen and Magic end up talking, and it turns out the ring that they saw earlier was a Navy ring. Mm-hmm. And they checked the list
of who has that ring.
And it turned out one of the people on the list was Al Calvici, who died last year. And that's the same time frame that Dean Stockwell died, so that's nice. That's a nice little tribute there.
That's what I expected them to do, and I'm happy that they left it at that.
And the mysterious character that you were talking about last week in our episode 0.
I had known her name was Janice, which is true. They gave her the name Janice, and Janice is...
turns out to be Al Calvici's daughter.
Yes, which we had not speculated on at all.
Yes, we did not think about that.
We were questioning, where's Beth and where's Donna and where's Sammy Joe? We completely neglected the fact that at the end of Quantum Leap, we learned Al and Beth have 4 daughters in the new history.
Via that stupid title card.
Yes.
But anyway, moving past that. So yeah, this hints that the timeline has changed, and the show is acknowledging that timeline change, which was something of a concern of yours. And it's quite possible that Janice knows Sam Beckett in this new timeline.
Yes. We were told that Janice wanted to work on the project. She was denied by the Department of Defense, denied her to work on the project. She was trying to follow in her father's footsteps, and they said she was too close to the project because of her relationship to Al and Sam.
But did not disqualify Magic, who had a connection to Tom, who was, of course, Sam's brother.
Yeah.
So that's interesting in itself.
Yeah, so either it's because Magic already had such a high clearance that he's involved in this, or nobody really knows that Sam leapt into Magic and he is involved in the original story as well. And does Magic know that? hope we find out.
We go to Addison's and Ben's apartment, where she picks up his phone and gets a message from Ben saying that what he is doing is really important, and he had to do this. Doesn't go into specifics about why, won't tell her, but he does mention that he will learn things.
He said that this is bigger than you ever would have imagined, and you'll find out these things as we go, and hopefully we as an audience get to find out these things as we go.
I read some speculation on the forums and the Facebook pages that the person, or that the reason that he left into the past was to try to get Sam Beckett home.
Yes, that's my assumption. We haven't been told that in concrete, but we know for sure that Ben was working with Janice, building this new code, and together they basically hijacked Project Quantum Leap to do whatever it is they're trying to do without telling anyone. For sure, we know that Addison has no idea what's going on. She was left out of this. Her fiance did not tell her his secret plans to steal the project. Given that Janice is Al's daughter, my personal guess is that on Al's deathbed, his dying wish was to Janice, I need you to write the one thing in my life I was never able to do, which is bring Sam home.
And if this is the intention that they intend to go in, I mean, it's a cool direction, but there's just one problem. We mentioned at the top that Scott Bakula has said he has no involvement in this series.
Right.
So if that's true, and he continues to hold out, that's a narrative dead end for the series.
Yeah, right. They can't find Sam and bring him home if Scott Bakula is not going to come and participate. Unless they did it all with, like, CGI and whatever. I mean, I don't think this show has that kind of budget.
Probably not. And they would have to get Sam's permission, or not, Scott Bakula's permission to do that, given the fact that he's still alive.
Yeah.
And
well, they did use his image.
That's true. So
we got to see an image of Sam in this episode.
So he clearly gave permission for that. But I mean, if he gives permission for a CGI Sam, he might as well come back and do the episode.
Right? And why doesn't he want to do the episode? It's not like he's not acting anymore and retired and saying, I don't want to act. He's currently actively acting. He is an actor. So, I don't know. I really want to know more about why is he not agreeing to come back.
If he has a problem with the show in general and the direction, he's too much of a gentleman to say so.
Yes.
He's not unlike his his Sam Beckett character. So then we see Sam, once again, not Sam, Ben leaping onto a space shuttle. Damn, I'm really screwing up at the end of this. Space shuttle Atlantis, which, according to Internet Movie Database, the leap takes place in 1995. He starts to say, "Oh shit," which is his new catchphrase. We don't hear the shit part of that, though, but that's clearly what he's saying.
Yeah, he says, "Oh shit," and then we cut away.
The next episode, according to Internet Movie Database, and this is the only episode that they have information on, is titled Atlantis. I looked into it. The space shuttle that docked with Russian space station Mir in 1995 was Atlantis. Now, from as far as I can tell, nothing bad happened during that event.
Nothing like catastrophic, newsworthy. So it could be a more personal story.
Or they could be making something up and saying that they prevented it.
Right.
That's why we've never heard of it.
Which is something the original series did do. They did make it seem often that the world we live in is the world Sam's already fixed. Biggest example of that being when Sam was Lee Harvey Oswald. He was trying to save the president.
John F. Kennedy.
And he says, I failed. And Al says, you didn't fail. You saved the First Lady. Originally, Jackie Kennedy died. You don't remember because of your Swiss cheese.
I gotta say, when I was 12 years old and I saw that ending, I groaned. As a 12-year-old, I hated that ending.
So what they were telling us then is the world we know exists because of Dr. Sam Beckett. So it is possible that they're going to give us historical moments and tell us something bad did happen, but Sam fixed it.
Yay!
Or Ben fixed it.
Well, yeah. Well, Sam also fixed it, but that's not who we're talking about right now. So one more thing before we conclude this podcast. We saw a trailer for the upcoming season?
Well, before we do that, couple points I want to just bring up that we didn't talk about specifically. The waiting room.
Oh, yes. We didn't see the waiting room at all.
There was no mention of the waiting room or of the host being in the future. That seems like a big thing to me.
Yeah, that's a pretty big oversight. One that I sincerely hope that they correct in the upcoming episodes. They gotta tell us what's going on here.
Yeah. Did they completely change the mechanics of leaping and nobody comes to the future now? If so, it doesn't feel like you're doing the same project, right?
Right. They could be making it a mind swap, but then where does the other mind go?
Right. And if this character, Nick/Matt, was in the waiting room, shouldn't they have talked to him? That was standard procedure in the original show, is to go talk to the person in the waiting room. And that person could have told him, I'm a police officer. This is my real identity. Or if he didn't want to break his cover, at least there should have been some mention saying, hey, we tried talking to him, we didn't get anything. But they completely skipped that step of mentioning that this other person is part of this story.
Now, a part of that could come down to the completely rushed nature of this episode. Maybe they just didn't feel like they had time to get into that with everything else they were trying to do.
Right. So it's something to watch for as we go into this series. Is there a waiting room? Is the host in the future? What's going on with that?
They definitely have to explain it.
And another cool thing just to note is we got to see some of the hand link.
That was pretty cool.
And it had this 3D projection of a map that helped them navigate when Ben was driving that getaway vehicle. So that was fun. That's an upgrade.
Yep.
It didn't have this neon gummy bear look that our original hand link had.
I kind of missed that hand link, to be honest with you.
So it was not a 1980s hand link. But Madison is using a hand link, and it seemed to have some pretty cool features where it popped up that map. She was able to pop up a holographic image of Sam when she was talking about him.
That's how we saw him.
And so the hand link is present, but as you said before, Ziggy has not been given a voice. So it's yet to be seen if we're really going to get to see Ziggy as a character. Now, in the beginning of the original series, Ziggy didn't have a voice or a character, but as the series went on, Ziggy got Deborah Pratt's voice, and Ziggy had a mind of her own, and we got to really see her character play out. And it'll be interesting to see if we get that from this Ziggy.
And I think I have already noticed this, but Deborah Pratt is credited on Internet Movie Database as having appeared as Ziggy.
Right. So whether that's really something that's going to play out, or that was just them assuming that that narrator was Ziggy speaking. And I don't know. Or are they just going to continue to treat Ziggy as a computer and leave it at that?
We'll see.
Let's see. Just want to make sure we covered everything that I took notes on. As far as character development, I don't think we really learned much that we didn't already know that we talked about last week about those 5 main characters. We confirmed that Ben and Addison are engaged. We learned that they were supposed to be in opposite roles in this project. We learned about Ben, that he speaks many languages. We talked about that. And we learned that he's not really cut out for this.
I mean, I wouldn't be either, so I wouldn't feel too bad about that.
This is, he wasn't meant to be the leaper. Addison says, you're usually sitting behind a computer. You don't, know how to use a gun or drive a getaway car.
I mean, for the most part, he did pretty well for himself.
Yeah,
he did.
The case. He pulled it off. But we get that character development, that pretty much everything that he's going to be experiencing is going to be out of Ben's comfort zone. He's no James Bond.
I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but Raymond Lee as Ben Song, I thought did a pretty good job stepping into Scott Bakula's shoes as the new Leaper.
Yes, he did.
He was very charismatic, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of him as the series progresses.
Absolutely. We didn't really get any development on magic beyond what we already know. There was no reference to that prior leap, which I didn't expect there to be so quickly. We got to see a little bit more of Jen. We knew that she was willing to take the fall for the project. She seemed to me like a very hard worker. She seemed to be more serious about stepping up and trying to fix things and really be involved. So I think that we're going to get to see more of her in the future, being a strong player in this project.
I would hire her for sure.
We got to see more about Ian than I knew. I took it that he was kind of taking some of Al's roles from the original show. And of course, Addison's physically taking the role of the hologram, and Magic's taking the role of like the lead on the project, which Al was kind of that too. You know, he was the lead military person. But I feel like Ian's kind of taking some of Al's persona, given that I think Ian has some really interesting fashion choices.
There was a mention of early on of not believing in monogamy.
Yes, that's on my list here. Yep. So I said Ian has interesting fashion sense, like Al did. Ian straight up said that they do not believe in monogamy, which is very in tune with the Al that we know.
Absolutely, but probably Al ended up quite a bit different.
Al ended up happy at married, but we even know before he met Beth, he was quite a ladies' man, right? We met Bingo.
Right.
And he bragged about, you know, his romantic endeavors from when he was 12. So
I think as early as 10.
Yeah, so Al definitely has that character, whether you know, even though it didn't play out the same way as we saw it. I feel like they're kind of nodding at that with Ian. And we also talked about Ian drug use. You know, Ian was clearly talking about doing mushrooms and then was like, oh, wait, I don't mean that because I'm an employee of the U.S. government. So I feel like Ian's kind of akin to the character of Al as far as personality-wise and things like that.
I get the impression, and not just from this episode, but from other things I read, that Ian Wright definitely knows more than what they have said about what's going on.
Right. And I think there's a lot of secrets going on. Even, you know, I said maybe Ian's working with Ben and Janice. Maybe Ian's working opposite of them. I mean, we don't know what's at play here. Ben told Addison, something bigger is going on than you know. So I hope they stick with that, and it is bigger. I want answers, though. I don't just want more questions.
Right, and I do not want the series to end on another title card suggesting that Ben never gets home.
Yeah, right. Let's get Ben home.
If they do that, I'm going to torch NBC, personally. Okay, no, just kidding. I'm not going to do that. I don't need the FBI coming. I was just kidding.
All right, so at the end of the episode, if you watched it on NBC, they showed a trailer. And it's not the next week on. It's the this season on type of trailer that you usually see after a season premiere of a show. And if you watched on Peacock, they don't show that trailer. You got to go seek it out yourself. But if you haven't seen that trailer, go watch it. It shows us a lot, right?
It does.
There's a lot of little clips, and it's showing scenes from different episodes we're going to see this season. Some of them we've seen in other trailers already, such as boxing scene, the space shuttle, which we are going to get to next week, presumably, if they do that in order like they're supposed to.
I mean, I hope they do.
Well, yeah, we know that episode 2 is titled Atlantis. Yeah, so, yes, that's next week. One little clip in there that I was very excited to see sure as heck looked like a scene from the original episode Vietnam. And it was a really tiny little clip, and we saw a male character in the same exact outfit and head wrappings that we saw Sam as Magic in that episode. So I feel like we're going to revisit Vietnam in some sense.
Whether it might even be the same platoon, which would be very interesting. Mm-hmm. If we revisit those moments in that episode.
And that little clip was so fast, Dave didn't even notice it when he saw the trailer.
At first when I was watching it on YouTube, I did not notice it at all until Stacie pointed it out.
So I feel like it was very Easter eggy and meant for those of us who are really paying attention.
Which is not me, by the way.
To question. And maybe it's nothing, but hopefully it really ties this all in at some point.
The part that got me really excited was seeing Justin Hartley.
Yes.
From This Is Us, a show that you and I both watched, and which I covered quite extensively I may or may not go back and do more videos on that. At this point, I kind of don't feel like it, but maybe I will at some point. Mm-hmm. But it's very exciting to see Justin Hartley.
Justin Hartley, Kevin from This Is Us, makes an appearance at some point this season as a character that Ben sees in history, right?
Looks like he's leaping into a woman at that point, and that Justin Hartley. Justin Hartley.
You can call him Kevin. It's all right.
Justin Hartley is proposing to her.
Yeah, so that's going to be fun.
And I think that's a good place to stop. We've covered a lot about this episode. If you like this podcast and want to support it, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow and subscribe on these podcast platforms. If you're on my YouTube channel, you can, of course, like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing. You can buy something from the Corn Production store on Zazzle. You can buy me a copy, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. And I think that's it.
And tune in next week.
And looking forward to seeing you guys. This is Dave and Stacie from Corn Productions signing off.